This is the Last Minute Blues Podcast with Donny, Alex, Jeremy, and Jeff Burton.
It is the Last Minute Blues Podcast. No Donny Fandango today. I even have to make sure I turn on the right camera because typically I turn his one on. He is Jeremy Rutherford of The Athletic. I'm Alex Ferrario. Donny has his 24-hour radiothon starting tomorrow, and so he's like, I got to have some time to myself because for the next 24 hours starting tomorrow morning, it's going to be all Donny in the radio station.
I don't know how he does it. I don't know how
either.
anybody does any of those radio, TV, telethons. And a lot of times, like in this case with Donny, and he does great work. He's done it for years for this, but raising money for charity. But you see Mike Bush, I grew up in St. Louis.
Oh, yeah?
You see Mike Bush for years and years. Okay, when you leave there, are we sleeping for 2 days?
Yeah, do you go into hibernation mode?
We got to ask Donny.
Or is it even possible to sleep when you go into that? Because after 24 hours straight of specifically radio, I got to think that I'd be wired for a while. The closest we've ever been to a 24-hour radiothon was probably Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final.
It was.
No radio, though. It was just straight writing and celebrating.
The only thing is you got a little adrenaline going there, right?
Yeah.
The whole night.
Did you stay up after that? Did you wait for your flight the next day?
You're talking the Dallas game?
No, the Boston. In Boston, Game 7.
Yeah, so I think, both the Dallas game, double OT, Pat Maroon goal, and also Game 7 against Boston, both nights I stayed up all night long.
Well, I guess because Dallas, you were going straight to San Jose afterwards, right?
Yeah, I think with Dallas, though, after Pat Maroon scored the goal, I went home, and I think I've told the story, but when I finished writing my story at 6:30 in the morning at home, my kids were getting up for school. And the only reason it takes that long, people are like, how could it take that long to write a story? I was embedding video of Pat Maroon and his mom hugging each other as soon as they saw each other after the game. So it takes a little while to do all that.
Kid in the locker room.
Exactly, all that video work to get done. And then, I think at the Game 7 in Boston, they kicked us out of the press box in Boston. Remember that?
Yeah.
At 1 in the morning. So then I had to go back to the hotel and finish. I think I finished at about 6:30 and then went on with Bernie Miklas at 101 ESPN at 7 o'clock. Yeah.
See, you're just an ultimate gamer right there, JR.
Yeah, but again, there's the adrenaline. I don't know how Donny does it. So it looks like he's getting a pre-nap. Is that what this is?
Yeah, I would imagine he's going to sleep for 18 hours beforehand and then just go 24 hours through. And then after that, then he'll just kind of get back down to earth with it. But all the support to Donny with that one. It'll go from Thursday to Friday, and you can donate and hear everything over at 105.7 The Point. And I believe, and I hope I'm not misunderstanding this, benefits the Ronald McDonald House. And Donny's been doing this for a long time, so he does phenomenal work with that one. But we've got lots to get into, JR. It's obviously the episode primer for the NHL Draft and the offseason that kicks off on July 1st. Coming off of the episode that we did a couple of days ago of Steve Chapman and Brenda Wilbur talking about those jerseys. And I don't know about you, but the hype that I have been seeing from people and calling me saying, where do I get this jersey? How can I get this jersey? People are in love with what Steve and Brenda and the team put together.
Yeah, we put a story out at The Athletic yesterday. Of course, we put the podcast out. So a lot of content out there talking about the new jerseys. Alex, late last night was the first time I had a chance to look at the comment section to the article that I wrote about the uniforms. And I could not believe it. I think it's deserved because I like the uniforms. The comment section was lit up. Love them, fire, can't wait to get it, take my money, nonstop. So, I think by and large, the reaction from Blues fans was pretty good.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it on this team in action moving forward, but the jerseys worked out well. And, what Steve talked about in that interview that we did with him, JR, was, the rebranding, the remix that goes with the next wave of players. And I think that brings us to the big topic that we can get into today. I didn't expect that this was far down on my to-do list of what we were going to talk about today on the podcast, but it's Jordan Kyrou and the potential noise. Luckily for you, we're 16 days away from potentially not having to talk about Jordan Kyrou getting traded because the no trade protection kicks in, but a lot of speculation has been out there, and then Frank Saravalli decides to drop the earlier today, putting him on his trade board. Now, we know how these work. They go on the trade board because people hear information of, hey, the Blues are putting his name out there on the trade market. It doesn't mean he's going to get traded, but to see his name on this list, I don't know really how to read this in terms of what the Blues are trying to accomplish this offseason with a trade of Kyrou if that happens.
Yeah, first of all, let's back up a little bit in terms of we all knew that there would be some chatter surrounding Jordan Kyrou leading up to the date where his full no-trade clause kicks in. And let's give people some information on how this works. Everybody's like, didn't Jordan Kyrou sign this 8-year contract, $65 million in 2022? Well, yes, he did. But according to the CBA, your full trade clause does not kick in until a certain age or certain time. And so with Kyrou and Robert Thomas both, that no trade clause kicks in at the end of this month. So June 30th for Kyrou and July 1st for Thomas. I don't know why the difference in the day between those two.
It's that extra day.
Either way, so what have people been talking about the past couple of years, especially when Kyrou was a minus 38, was will he be traded before that full no trade clause kicks in? And Alex, I think it's a situation where you look at Torrey Krug. The Blues tried to trade him. He vetoed the trade. I think they wanted to trade Braden Shen, and he wanted to stay. And so no trade clauses are real. Doug Armstrong can talk all he wants about there being a big drastic difference between the no move and the no trade, and there is a difference. But the no trade still gives these guys a ton of protection. And so now here we are, just a few days out from June 30th when Jordan Kyrou can suddenly veto any trade. And I think that we talked about it with Doug a couple days ago. I asked him the question, do you really analyze a player when there's just a couple weeks left before that kicks in and decide, is he part of the future? Do we want to trade him now while we can before he has that veto power? And Doug, I thought, kind of played off the question. You'd expect it, kind of management speak. Alex, I don't know what you thought there.
Same.
Where he just said that, it's just another day on the calendar. Well, it's not. And so there's going to be rumors between now and then, and I think we can get into, what could a Jordan Kyrou trade look like if the Blues potentially do move him.
And see, this is the hardest part for me, JR. In the context that I put with this is a piece that Dom put on The Athletic yesterday, talking about the strength of wingers in the National Hockey League for each team. And he had the Blues at third. When you think of Kyrou and Buchnevich and Holloway and Neighbors, and then add in the youth of Bolduc and the youth of Jimmy Snuggerud, I guess I could see where Doug Armstrong and company might be coming from looking at this, saying, do we believe that Holloway, Bolduc, and Snuggerud can produce what Jordan Kyrou is producing over these last couple of years? Because if so, teams that make deals, they make deals from an area of strength. And the area of strength for the Blues is obvious, the winger position. But the question that I keep having with this one is, what are you expecting to get in return? Because the area that we all see that needs an obvious upgrade is the center position. Doug even told us that on BK and Ferrario on Monday after his media availability. The third-line center or second-line center is where they would like to make an upgrade. That's great. But if you're trading Jordan Kyrou, you're not trading him for a third-line center. You're trading a guy who has produced 70 points for 3 straight years, 30-plus goals for 3 straight years, or not all, but almost all at even strength. You're trading that player to get back a really good young core piece in return that fills your center void. I don't think that's out there on the market, JR.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I heard you yesterday, BK Ferrario, talk about those options that are out there on those trade boards. And also you talk about free agents that you could bring in. And what could Jordan Kyrou on the move bring you back in a trade? And it doesn't seem like there's a lot of options out there that you would be happy with if you're a Blues fan. But let's look at this from a couple different perspectives. I think first and foremost, you're not trading Jordan Kyrou before his no trade clause kicks in unless the deal makes absolute 100% sense for the Blues. Yeah, okay, so you had the flexibility. You moved him without getting his approval, but guess what? You didn't get a return on him. Yeah. So, Doug Armstrong has said in the past, if I want to trade a guy, even if he's got a no trade clause, I'll trade him. So guess what? He'd prefer to make that deal 6 months from now, either talk Kyrou into the trade, force it, waiver, whatever, to get a situation where he can make that trade when he can get the value that he's looking for Jordan Kyrou. So to me, that's first and foremost. But you look at this situation, so many things can happen. They could find a center in free agency. Guess what? Now your center is solved. The problem's solved. And then Kyrou stays on the team, right? You could bring Dvorsky to camp, and yeah, maybe he doesn't look great the first month of the season, but then 6 months in, it clicks, and now you've got your number 2 center, and now you don't have to trade Jordan Kyrou for a center. And so you could look at it that way. I'm not necessarily in a rush to make this trade if I'm the Blues. I'm going to continue to find, okay, is it a right shot defense? Are we moving Falk out and bringing Noah Dobson in, and we're paying Noah Dobson? What makes sense? But, the bottom line is there are deadlines, and there is one coming up with this no trade clause, and the Blues have to decide, is he the type of guy who's going to help you win in the playoffs? And is he the type of guy that Alexander Steen wants on his roster moving forward? To me, those are the 2 biggest questions going into this conversation.
And see, that was kind of the question that I had, too, was, is this more about you don't believe Kyrou can perform in the playoffs when you absolutely need him to? Because, look, I can explain what happened this past playoffs. He got lit up by Logan Stanley, and anybody's going to falter away in that one, but he also didn't have his winger with him. Or is this more about the style of player Jordan Kyrou is, and does it match the style that Jim Montgomery wants to play with? The Noah Dobson one is the one that I've heard, at least over the last couple of days, of potentially Kyrou for a Dobson. Dobson's name is out there. The hard part for me, JR, maybe you can help clarify this a little bit more for me, is does that make your team better? Because Doug wanted to get 5% better from where they were last year. Does trading a 70-point producer, 35-goal scorer for a defenseman who is 24 years old, who didn't have the greatest year last year, who is also probably going to get north of $9 million AAV, does that make your team better for the future without that offense?
Well, it probably doesn't when you eliminate the guy who's been your leading scorer for 3 straight years, 4 years. 2018-19, he had a couple goals, and then from then he's lit it up, right, with 3 30-goal seasons. So you lose a guy like that, for sure. You don't get better next year. However, the Blues feel like they have guys like a Jimmy Snuggerud who can come in and be those types of players. And you go to the Dom piece, and I had to double-check the byline to make sure it was Dom putting the Blues in
just
third place.
Just make sure, I was surprised by it too.
and the article is referring to the best group of wingers in the National Hockey League. He had the Blues third. And so, yeah, they do have some winger depth when you talk about Buchnevich and Holloway and Kyrou and Snuggerud and these guys. But the question is, to me, it isn't necessarily does it make you better today, because as Doug told us a couple days ago, reminded everybody, we're still looking at that blueprint. We're still looking at that, call it whatever you want. We're still looking at how do we get better moving forward in the future. And, if it's a young 26-year-old Dobson, even though he's going to cost $9 or $10 million and he's going in on that right side, and maybe you're moving a Justin Falk, and who knows if you get something back in the Falk deal, or, at least you're getting younger in that position, and you're fitting a guy who's in that core age group, then if Snuggerud and Holloway and those guys can score some of those goals that Kyrou did for you the past couple of years, but now you're getting this good young defenseman, I think it can reshape the roster. And it goes back to what we talked about a second ago. Does it make you a team that's going to be better suited for the playoffs? Is Jordan Kyrou a guy who you feel in a couple of years can take you 2, 3, 4 rounds in the Stanley Cup playoffs? If he's not, I think that's what they're looking at.
With Kyrou, and we'll move on from Kyrou from here, but I find this topic so fascinating. I think a lot of people with him, JR, is they say, well, Vladimir Tarasenko helped that team win the playoffs, and he was a guy that wasn't great defensively, but he turned it on in the playoffs, and anybody can change the way they play once you get to the postseason. Does that apply for a Kyrou? Because Tarasenko, to me, was just a different entity. He had the shot, but he was so big that you couldn't get the puck away from him. Now, maybe he wasn't the greatest defensively, but he was a big body. Kyrou's not that, and Kyrou did get pushed off the puck a little bit more in the playoffs, but it also felt like Jim Montgomery unlocked a little bit more from Jordan Kyrou. And as a coaching staff, that's what you hope to do with players, right?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you have to give Jordan Kyrou a ton of credit for the way he turned things around defensively. He's a better overall around player than he was a couple years ago. But the Tarasenko comparison, it's a valid one, but I look at it like this. First of all, Tarasenko was a big body. Not only could he absorb a hit, he could give a hit, and I know you watched every single second of the Stanley Cup run, but I've gone back and watched some reruns, some highlights, and Tarasenko lays some big hits, and it's pretty impressive, and he used his body a lot in that series. And when I think of Vladimir Tarasenko, I think of a guy who raises his game when it's on the big stage. Like, he wants to be that guy who does that type of thing. And we haven't quite seen that yet from Jordan Kyrou. Don't get me wrong, he scores 37 goals. He leads the team in scoring, like we said. But is he a guy who, when the game needs a goal, he goes and gets it? Tarasenko was that guy, and I don't think we've seen a Jordan Kyrou who's there yet.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about the Dobson rumors that are out there. And for those that don't know, Noah Dobson with the New York Islanders, young defenseman who a couple of years ago put up 70 points. Hearing Doug talk the other day and his availability pre-draft, it didn't sound like that's a priority to upgrade defense this offseason, but it still sounded like, hey, if we can, we will. And that's talking about the top 4. I liked the way he framed it. He's like, if you can find somebody that plays in there with Fowler, Parayko, and Broberg, that's what you're hoping for. He defined it as a top 4 defenseman. those aren't available very often, but it sure seems like if that option's out there, that is still a desire of theirs.
Yeah, let me play my tape from Doug Armstrong the past 3 years in the summertime. We'll explore it. We'll try to get better if we can. We'll try
2 years he didn't do it. Last year he actually did.
Yeah, we'll try to get better if we can. And so that's going to be the stock answer anytime we ask about the defense. The thing is, Alex, the past, 3 years, 4 years that we've been asking about all these defensive long-term contracts that have kind of handcuffed him because he's got the no-trade clauses for Leddy and Falk and Krug and all these guys is, well, guess what? Krug's not playing. He told us that. Obviously, he didn't play last year, but he said he's done. He's not playing. Looks like his career's over. And then you look at Justin Falk, it changes from a full no-trade to a modified.
Yeah.
You look at Nick Leddy, it changes from a full no-trade to a modified. Both of those happening on July 1st. And, again, to spell it out to fans, you go from the team can veto a trade to all 31 other teams to now they can only say no to 15 of them. And different clauses have different modifications. These two players in particular, they're modified means that they can say no to 15. And so if Doug Armstrong finds a team that's not on that list, he can move one of these players. And so, like he said, I don't think Doug Armstrong, would be disappointed coming to camp with that same top four. I think he nailed it. It's not a bad top four. Mm-hmm. Is it the best in the league? No. But let's hypothetically say that you can find a team not on Falk's list and you can trade him, or a team that's not on Leddy's list and you can trade him, and you can bring in a Dobson. And I'm not saying you have to trade Kyrou to do that, but the Blues do have some cap space, as we know. Dobson is a restricted free agent who's going to require a hefty paycheck, but I think it's a situation where he fits the age group. That's the biggest thing with me. And people talk about not having a great year last year. A lot of times that happens for those young guys who are going into those contract.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
Type situations. Where's my future? Who's going to pay me? How's this going to work out? So I think he's a good player. I think his age and his experience, even at a young age, he could come in and be a big part of this team moving forward. So. We'll see. I mean, that's just speculation, his name. But I think that if there was the opportunity to improve that defense, Doug would jump on it now that he has the flexibility with those no trade clauses changing.
A couple of other nuggets there before we get out of here. You mentioned Doug not being disappointed if you come back with the same top four. Let me widen that question. Is it a disappointment if this team comes back with the exact same roster that they had last season?
I think it is. I think that they went on a really good run towards the end of the year. I think that had a lot to do with the reset, with the Four Nations tournament, with guys getting healthy, which is great, with guys coming together, with everything starting to click with Jim Montgomery. And, I'm not going to sit here and say that can't happen from game one next season, but I think there are still glaring holes on this team. You cannot expect to contend in the Central Division, or I think even for a wild card spot, if you don't bring in a center. You cannot. Yeah. If Braden Shen is your number two, I think that can work. We saw it work at times last year, but I don't think Oscar Sundqvist can come back and be your number three center.
Here's the trickle-down effect. The Shen thing can work as a number two center if you have Holloway and Kyrou.
You have to.
Does that, because if you trade Kyrou, and again, if you trade it for something that's not a centerman, well, now you don't have that second line that was so good with Shen, so now you're talking about getting weaker at the forward position.
Yeah, and keep in mind that, Snuggerud came on board and looked good, and that's when Holloway left.
Yeah.
So now, potentially, you're going to have both of them back, so that could be, a little more depth in terms of absorbing a loss of Kyrou. And who's to say, what are you going to get back for Kyrou? So we'll see. But I just think that there's still holes on this team, regardless of the way last season finished on such a positive note. And I think it's with the center position mainly, but it's also that third line. Like, I like what Zach Bolduc's doing, but I don't think that Blues fans want to tune in each day and find out, okay, is Texier playing? Is Matthew Joseph in the lineup? Does Sundqvist need a day off? Like, you need that third line to produce. And I don't think the Blues have a roster right now where you can identify the third line and say that group is going to produce.
So not just the third line center, but the fourth line center is a possibility that they have to, quote unquote, upgrade over. Now, we don't know what's going to happen with Radek Faksa. When Doug talked about it, I mean, we were reading between the lines, but it sure sounded like, hey, he might want to see what's out there for him because, to credit to Faksa, you might be one of the top 5 centermen that's available this offseason. But that's a massive hole to fill also if you lose that player. Now, some will say, well, you could put Sundqvist there. It's great. But how available is Sundqvist to play the style that WTF line played? So I don't know really what's on the horizon for Faksa. You hope that one gets done for the Blues.
Right, and I'm one of those guys, in the media, 20 years watching guys come and go, and I sometimes I look at it from a fan perspective of like, why would Radek Faksa want to leave? He had such a good thing here with Toropchenko and Walker and the WTF, and you're in the locker room and you see the chemistry he has with these guys. Well, guess what? We don't know what they're being offered, and I'm just throwing out numbers just to spitball here. But like, let's say the Blues are 1.5, 2.2 million. And the Minnesota Wild are saying, "Hey, we got 3.2." Like that's what makes the difference.
Yeah,
that's
we'll
what
go
makes
where the money's
yeah.
at.
So guess what? He can find some buddies in a different locker room if he's getting paid another $1 million or $1.2 million. So we asked Doug Armstrong about Fox a couple days ago, and he said, "Yeah, we're talking. We'll find out on him." And then later on, he mentioned we got a forward who could come back, might not come back. So it didn't look like anything was imminent with that situation, but still have a few days before he hits free agency.
Is that good or bad, you think? The closer you get to July 1st, if you don't hear of a deal done, I would imagine that's not great news if you're a Blues fan hoping that Faksa is back.
Yeah, I think you're right in terms of, if it's taken a while, then it's probably a little less positive.
Yeah.
But, I've seen it where you think it's going the other way, and then all of a sudden, a day or two before free agency, they re-sign. So, too hard to read this one.
Yeah, well, and Joel Hofer, I know that's been an area of a lot of conversation for people.
You can't have him.
I was going to say, let me try to channel my inner, teen right now in 2025. The equivalent of what Doug Armstrong told us with Joel Hofer is, come at me, bro, because you're not getting him from us if you think you're going to offer sheet. Now, if somebody comes in for a trade, maybe that's a different conversation, but he essentially said, if you want him, fine. You're not going to get him unless we feel the picks are more valuable than Hofer.
Yeah, and let me get to that trade question in one moment. But in terms of what he said about Joel Hofer the other day, he said, look, we've got the cap space. We're going to do it the way Boston and Detroit did it, where we have enough cap space that if you come at me, bro, I'm going to have the money to match the offer. And, there's a lot of details here, probably too much for people driving around listening, but, offer sheet compensation. We know what it was last year. The Blues gave up a second for Broberg, a third for Holloway. So the way that works in terms of what Joel Hofer gets offered is if it's anywhere between 2.3 and 4.6 million, which is probably where Hofer would come in on an offer.
Yeah.
That only gets the Blues
second-round pick.
Is it a second-round pick? And they're going to match that, right? Yeah. So they're going to match that. So the team offering Hofer has to step up to $4.6 million per year, which not saying they couldn't do. Edmonton, if they want to do it, do it. That gets the Blues a first and third. And so what Doug said a couple days ago was that, hey, we're going to match if we choose to. And he said that, a first-round pick coming back is great, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to let him go for a first-round pick. He said that, we could still match at that point. So, I think that you look at Joel Hofer, he's right at that stage where he's shown that he can play in this league, and also age-wise, experience-wise, he's right there to pick up for Binnington if and when Binnington, takes off here in a couple of years, and maybe he'll be ready sooner. And maybe they'll make a move with Binnington when they see that Hofer is ready. But after Joel Hofer, you got – what do you got? You
Ellis.
got Colton Ellis.
And that's it.
And he's not – he's proven in terms of how far he's played at this point.
But he hasn't touched the NHL yet.
He's not proven to be an NHL goalie like Joel Hofer.
The one thing that I've made the point of, and I know we're short on time here, but Ellis is at the same stage that Hofer was, to where Ellis was the number one guy in Springfield, played the bulk of games. That's what Hofer did before he got to the NHL. And then once he got to the NHL, then he was just the backup and had a few games here and there. I don't know what their plan is for Ellis in terms of, you don't want to put him into a backup situation, especially when Jordan Binnington, they want him to play, no more than 45 games in a season. Well, then you can't really rely on a guy who's never played in the NHL 40-something games in a season.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens with that. Just a few days left before free agency. And then, Alex, let's not forget about the draft coming up. First round Friday night, second round through 7 on Saturday. The Blues just 3 picks.
I know.
3 picks.
I think Doug said he's going to try and squeeze in a nice 18 maybe before he gets their picks in the second day.
Yeah, the fact that the draft is not in another city like it's been, it's decentralized, so the Blues brass will be here in St. Louis. And like Alex said, Doug said a couple days ago, I'll try to squeeze in. So you never know. He said, look.
Yeah. Joking there,
he
by
makes
the
so
way.
many deals on draft day. Like, I feel like.
That's true.
That's when the whole Shen and Laterra, everything happens at the draft. So we'll see what happens, but should be interesting, even though they only have the 3 picks. They do have number 19. There's some good players there. Cameron Reed, Logan Hensler, a defenseman. I did talk to a guy here in St.Louis, a prospect who could be drafted this weekend.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you're looking at late first round, early second round for Shane Van Sage.
Oh, okay, I've seen his name out there.
Local player, played for the AAA Blues, plays at Michigan State right now. I'll have a story up on him at The Athletic, and he's friends, and I think played with Logan Hensler, who's a defenseman right around that 19 pick. Could be a guy that the Blues are
right-handed
interested
shot,
in.
which they don't have a whole lot of in their system.
Yep, has a little bit of size.
Yeah, I know you never want to go, the positional need. You kind of go with the best available player, but they don't have any right-handed defensemen other than Jiricek in their system. So that's kind of why I wonder if they go that route. I've heard people talking about, do the Blues take a goaltender? Because there's a goaltender that's supposed to be a first-round pick that's right around. I don't believe Doug has ever taken a goalie first round.
Yeah, no, I looked it up, and I think I actually had it wrong the first time. I think I said that it was Colton Ellis in the 3rd round, but it turned out that it was Evan Fitzpatrick in the 2nd round.
Oh, okay.
Fitzpatrick never sniffed the NHL, so I can't see the Blues sneaking up and taking a goalie in the first round. And there are going to be some good players, whether it be, the centers. You look at, I think it's Braden Coots. You look at the defenseman Reed and Hensler that we talked about. There should be a good player there.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one. So the draft on Friday, we are going to have an NHL Draft show on 101 ESPN. Myself and Chris Kerber are hosting it. JR's probably going to swing by at some point. I know he's got like 17 other duties he's going to have to take care of. And, of course, Donnie's doing his Radiothon from Thursday to Friday. So we'll have a draft show on Friday for you. We will be back with a new episode probably the week after free agency, because really it gets dated on free agency if something happens and we do a podcast the day before. But if the Blues do make some type of move, we'll have a new episode out for you. But otherwise, we'll be back the following week after free agency with a brand new episode of Last Minute Blues Podcast, maybe talking about some Blues transactions. If you haven't yet, make sure you go check out the video that we did with Steve Chapman and Brenda Wilbur talking about the new Blues jerseys, the remixed logo that they have. Wherever you get your podcasts from, you can download it, or you can watch it over on our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe, so you can get all the updates once we put new episodes out there. Jeremy Rutherford of The Athletic for Donny Fandango of 105.7 The Point.
Get some sleep, Donnie.
Get some sleep, because you're not going to for the next 2 days. I'm Alex Ferrario, and for our good buddy Jeff Burton, this has been the Last Minute Blues Podcast. And as Donnie says, let's go Blues.
The Last Minute Blues Podcast. Hear more at 1057thepoint.com.